attributes for HTTP methods: get, put, post, patch, delete, etc., such as whether or not they are filterable, searchable, or pageable. Traits can be declared in the same RAML file, or you can create different files for creating the traits. Traits can be called from resource types using the is keyword only. Difference between put and patch method. Put is a method of modifying resource where the client sends data that updates the entire resource. Patch is a method of modifying resources where the client sends partial data that is to be updated without modifying the entire data. 3. What is API Auto-Discovery? API Auto-Discovery is used to pair the API and API Manager to a deployed Mule application. When Auto-Discovery is correctly configured in your Mule application, you can say that your application's API is tracked by or paired to API Manager. An API in a Mule runtime can only be associated with one Auto-Discovery instance. No two auto-discoveries can be associated to the same API in a Mule runtime. 4. What is the difference between throttling and rate limiting? Rate limiting and throttling are the API policies available in MuleSoft. You can apply these policies through API Manager. Rate limiting. The rate limiting policy limits the number of requests an API accepts within a window of time. The API rejects requests that exceed the limit. Throttling. The throttling policy queues requests that exceed limits for possible processing in a subsequent window. The API eventually rejects the request if processing cannot occur after a certain number of attempts. You can configure a delay between retries, as well as limit the number of retries. 5. What is horizontal scaling and vertical scaling? Vertical scaling is to increase the worker size. When you want to process the CPU-intensive APIs or process large payload with small number of requests, increase the vCore size. Horizontal scaling is to increase the number of worker, if you want to increase the throughput of high-frequency small payload. 6. Which connectors have you used in your project? HTTP Connector, Amazon S3 Connector, Database Connector, FTP Connector, LDAP Connector, NetSuite Connector, SFTP Connector, Web Service Consumer Connector. 7. What are the operations performed by SFTP Connector? SFTP Connector provides access to files and folders on a SFTP server. Supported operations: copy, create directory, delete, list, move, read, rename, write. 7. Which Dataweave functions have you used? Map, map object, plug, split by, group by, disconnect by, lookup, join by. 8. What is lookup? This function enables you to execute a flow within a Mule app and retrieve the resulting payload. It works in Mule apps that are running on Mule runtime version 4.1.4 and later. Similar to the flow reference component, recommended, the lookup function enables you to execute another flow within your app and to retrieve the resulting payload. It takes the flow's name and an input payload as parameters. For example, lookup, another flow, payload, executes a flow named another flow. The function executes the specified flow using the current attributes, variables, and any error, but it only passes in the payload without any attributes or variables. Similarly, the called flow will only return its payload. Note that lookup function does not support calling subflows. 9. Difference between map and map object. Map iterates over items in an array and outputs the results into a new array. Map object iterates over an object using a mapper that acts on keys, values, or indices of that object. From the functionality-wise, both are same but both work on different input and return different output, where array and object are Java array and Java object. 10. How to avoid null values in Dataweave. It's easy to remove null values in Dataweave by using the skip nullin attribute. Example: %DW 1.0 %output application /JSON skip nullin equals everywhere. Dash state inbound properties state zip code inbound properties zip code 2 without skip nullin %DW 1.0 %output application /JSON dash state inbound properties state when inbound properties state equals null. Zip code inbound properties zip code when inbound properties zip code equals null. 11. Dataweave playground. Given input var1 equals a:/aa bbb var2 equals ccc. Expected output results aaa/a bbb/b ccc/c /results. Script %DW 2.0 output application /XML var1 equals a:/aa bbb var2 equals ccc. Results var1 plus var2. Dataweave playground. Given input hello world. Expected output hello world. Script %DW 2.0 output application /JSON dash payload split by /s/. 13. Dataweave playground. Given input 2021-09-14T23:57:59. Expected output 11:57:59 p.m. September 14, 2021. Script %DW 2.0 output application /JSON dash formatted datatime 2021-09-14T23:57:59 as string format KKMMSSA MMMMDD U. What is pluck? Pluck, k, v, value, v, key, k, index, number, r array r. Useful for mapping an object into an list, array. Pluck iterates over an object and returns an array of keys, values, or indices in that object. It is an alternative to map object, which is similar but returns an object, instead of an array. 15. What is the difference between URI parameter and query parameter? The first difference between query and URI parameters is their position in the URL. While the query parameters appear on the right side of in the URL, URI parameters come before the question mark sign. Secondly, the query parameters are used to sort/filter resources. On the other hand, URI parameters are used to identify a specific resource or resources. You can't omit values in URI parameters since they are part of the URL. On the other hand, query parameters are added at the end of the URL, and thus can allow omission of some values as long as the serializing standards are followed. 16. What is the difference between for each and parallel for each? Parallel for each scope. The parallel for each scope enables you to process a collection of messages by splitting the collection into parts that are simultaneously processed in separate routes within the scope of any limitation configured for concurrent processing. After all messages are processed, the results are aggregated following the same order they were in before the split, and then the flow continues. For each scope. The for each scope splits a payload into elements and processes them one by one through the components that you place in the scope. It is like a for each/for loop code block in most programming languages and can process any collection, including lists and arrays. The collection can be any supported content type, such as application/JSON, application/Java, or application/XML. 17. How to remove all variables at the end of the flow? Remove variable transformer. The remove variable component takes a variable name and removes the variable from the Mule event. 18. Which connectors will be used in transactional? Mule applies the concept of transactions operations in application for which the result cannot remain indeterminate. In other words, where a series of steps in a flow must succeed or fail as one unit, Mule uses a transaction to demarcate such a unit. For example, you might use a transaction to encapsulate several steps in a flow for which the end result involves committing information to a database. In this type of scenario, the commit is either entirely complete and succeeds, or is incomplete and it fails. Even if partially complete, the commit or transaction fails. Where a transaction fails, Mule rolls back the operations within the transaction so that no one part results in partial completion. The following connectors support transactional demarcation: JMS, JDBC, VM. 19. If the target system is down for 24 HRS or more, how you will handle the payload? Anypoint MQ is a cloud messaging service that performs asynchronous messaging scenarios between applications such as queuing and pub/sub. Is managed easily using Anypoint platform. Supports large payloads, encryption, queuing, and publish/subscribe. Pub/sub paradigms. Enables easy connection to non-Mule applications using the REST API. Provides dead letter queue, DLQ, for undeliverable messages. Displays usage statistics on the number of messages and API requests. How can you merge two arrays in Dataweave? Flatten and turns a set of subarrays, such as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, null, into a single, flattened array, such as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, null. Note that it flattens only the first level of subarrays and omits empty subarrays.